Over the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time teaching people how to use Microsoft Teams on Teams. As a presenter in training and coaching sessions, I rely on audience feedback to direct and shape my presentation. In person, people make involuntary sounds, expressions, and gestures that a presenter feeds off. On a video conference, though, we don't get much of that. Everybody's on mute by default, so we don't hear groans or grumbles or joyous outbursts. As a poor substitute, we ask people to turn their videos on. At least then we can see head nods, smiles, engagement or disengagement. So we always ask people to turn their camera on. In some organisations, most people already have their cameras on. And we'll see this repeatedly within the same organisation with multiple groups over time. In other organisations, nobody turns their camera on. And it's like pulling teeth to try and get somebody to turn their camera on. Out of 20 or 30 people, you'd be lucky to get one or two. During the pandemic, video conferencing became completely and utterly normal. Many companies have now embraced so-called hybrid work, allowing people to work from home or the office with flexibility. And even at those organisations where employees have been forced to go back into the office, video conferencing is still here to stay. And that's definitely a good thing because although it's the poor cousin of a face-to-face meeting, it allows us to connect with people anywhere in the world. Here, in what is apparently the most lockdown city in the world, Melbourne, a friend of mine took up a new job and joined a new company. Several months in, during one of our lengthy lockdowns, he had never seen the faces of his colleagues. They all worked and met together with cameras off. I find that incredible. And I've read stories of other companies where camera on always is a rule. If you're not on camera from 9 to 5, then you might get written up by a manager. Now, I've struggled to identify a pattern from my observations of camera off or camera on culture. Why do people at some companies all turn their camera on seemingly willingly, and yet at others, nobody's willing to go on camera? What's going on and why does it matter? Well, here's my take. Have you ever heard of the Moravian study? It's usually applied like this. 7% of your communication is verbal, 38% is in the tone that you say it with, 55% comes from your expressions and your body language. Well, it's wrong to say it that way. The way it's usually presented is a wild misapplication of the research and the intent of Moravian study. But the reason that it's a popular myth is that it taps into something that we know to be true intuitively. Tone, body language, and expression are very important tools in communication. If I'm meeting with you on Teams, I can usually see on your face that you've tuned out or that you're doing emails. If you're talking to somebody and they start to multitask, you can hear it in their tone of voice and the words that they say too. And based on that, I can either adjust my presentation or ask you to get involved and pay attention. If you want to have a quality, focused conversation with your team, why would you choose to do it with only half of a toolkit? But my observation is that a lot of organizations choose to do just that. They operate with half of the toolkit. Now, I'm not saying that you should be on camera at all times. There are plenty of great reasons that you could go to a meeting and turn the camera off. In fact, a Stanford Social Media Lab study found that seeing yourself on camera was one of the 4 key causes of what they labeled Zoom fatigue. They said it was like having a mirror placed in front of you all day long. It's exhausting for several reasons. It's a bit weird to see yourself constantly when you think about it. Fortunately, both Teams and Zoom now allow you to turn your self-view off, somewhat mitigating this issue and allowing you to be present and to present yourself without being so self-conscious. But I'm talking about the consistent practice of no cameras in certain organizations. I suspect that this practice is related to the culture of the organization. If an organization has a strong team culture where everybody is focused on the same just cause and they're working together to achieve it, I think they're more likely to take advantage of tools that could benefit team interactions. In his book, The Infinite Game, Simon Sinek talks about the prioritization of will versus resources. An organization has a finite limit of resources. For example, we only have so much money in the budget, and we only have your time from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Those resources are finite. An organization that is focused on extracting every last drop from those resources, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, will quickly diminish the will of its employees. If you work under a manager who demands to see you on camera from 9 to 5 to make sure that you don't spend even a single minute unproductively, how engaged and excited to go to work do you think you'd be? I'd be looking for every single opportunity to turn my camera off in that sort of organization. In fact, I wouldn't stay employed for very long at all. What about a company that focuses on monthly and quarterly numbers over all else? If you don't hit your targets, you can expect the screws to clamp down on you. Organizations that are that driven by arbitrary metrics and rules instead of a mission are unlikely to be people-friendly environments. How likely would you be to turn up with your best self if you can't get on board with the company's mission? On the other hand, with will, the desire to work together to achieve your cause is practically infinite. And organizations that prioritize will over resources tap into far more resources. If your organization cares more about customers and staff and prioritizes those over numbers, then you're more likely to have a culture where people will do whatever they can to support each other, even if it means the inconvenience of presenting yourself on camera. The organization that prioritizes resources says, we need to extract work out of you. The organization that prioritizes will says, we're here to support you to do your best work and to achieve our common mission. In that situation, turning your camera off is perfectly okay. You're not likely to attract any negative attention for doing it because people understand that there are times when you need to be off camera. And yet at the same time in that organization, I think that you're far more likely to be on camera because you want to be. You want to work with your team to the best of your ability. Empathy and trust are at play here. There's no doubt that using your camera in a Teams meeting allows you to bring your full presence and connection to the table. There are other reasons that companies end up with a camera on or off culture too. General meeting practices come into play here. Many companies have terrible meeting cultures that include an endless parade of back-to-back, unnecessary and unimportant meetings. And as a result, people have developed deep and problematic multitasking practices that lead them to prefer being off camera. But bad meeting practices are still a team culture issue. I've personally noticed a major change over the last 2 years at Microsoft around cameras. The Microsoft folks that I meet with are much more likely to have their cameras on these days. And that's markedly different from what it was 2 or 3 years ago. Now, I don't know for sure, but the difference is so stark that I'd be willing to wager that it's an issue that's been well addressed throughout the organization. Again, there are plenty of times when I meet with Microsoft folks who say, hey, I can't have my camera on today. And they're very comfortable in doing that, which is perfect. But most of the time, they turn their cameras on. And that helps us all to improve our presence, engagement, and focus in meetings. Microsoft are also a very mission-driven company to help every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And while that won't always translate for every single team and every employee at such a large organization, I think it is an example of a mission-driven company fostering the will of its employees. I'll leave a link to an article on the Microsoft Work Lab website that explains how they are working with their managers to foster a better culture around hybrid work below. Nobody wants to have more meetings or longer meetings. And as a result, we need to keep our meetings tight, focused, and efficient. Love them or hate them, cameras do allow us to do more of that. Is your organization camera on or camera off? And why do you think it is that way? Tell us what you've observed in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and hit that notification bell to get notified about our next Microsoft Teams video.